Hello and welcome to this introduction to the International Permanent People's Tribunal into the human rights impacts of unconventional gas. On May 14th to the 18th in 2018, the Permanent People's Tribunal will be holding a session investigating the human rights impacts of unconventional gas. That tribunal will consider if there is sufficient evidence to indict certain named states on charges of failing to adequately respect the human rights of citizens as a result of them permitting and failing to adopt the precautionary approach to hydraulic fracturing and other techniques of unconventional oil and gas. We will be providing the Permanent People's Tribunal with evidence and testimony from Australia. Please visit the website indicated on this slide for more information. There you will find data about the tribunal itself, what this particular session will be about, and the norms that are the basis for bringing this case. But in Australia, our session will be to gather expert testimony and personal witnesses to provide their accounts from the Australian experience with unconventional gas. What we are going to see if we have enough evidence of is that Australian governments have failed to carry out their duty to adopt policy and to act to protect these rights. We'll be hosting evidence on a website which will be the content that the Permanent People's Tribunal will access for the international session. Our testimony and witness statements will be in the format of 10-minute video accounts and will be supported by any amount of written data that needs to go along with the presentation. The session has been split into a number of subcases and the basic rights that underpin each case. The subcases are listed here. First of all, there's the health impacts, the infrastructure impacts of the industry's impacts on climate change and the environment, the government's subsidised pursuit of fossil fuel, and the cultural and social impacts. We're really proud and excited to have a number of people and groups already willing to put their name to supporting this tribunal, and we look forward to welcoming others. As an overview of our intentions for this tribunal, the Australian government has failed already to learn from the industry and the experience in the US. There have been no baseline studies undertaken on aquifers, on air quality, before the development was undertaken. The states and the territories have principal responsibility in Australia, but the national government actually plays a very important leadership role. The national government should be developing the national energy policy. They should be protecting matters of national environmental significance. And they should be the ones who are establishing the regulatory and scientific framework. The industry and the government have basically provided this industry with political, legal, and fiscal primacy over all other elements of the country. So basically, this industry gets to have a profound impact, and their rights are stronger and more sustained in the face of us and the environment. So that by definition will create a deficit to the human rights dimensions. There's also a really fundamental assumption that is very seriously flawed. The industry and the government assume that the public benefit of extracting the gas is greater than any other cost that may arise from doing it. That seriously flawed assumption is also then spinned further by the government and the industry to say that gas is a mystical bridging fuel between fossil fuels and renewable energy. Again, further damning evidence that their assumptions to base this industry on is seriously flawed. So the magnitude of this issue, the magnitude of the industry and its impact, is on a scale and a pace that has never been seen before in Australian history. It has a massive geographical extent and incredibly dense extraction density. The industry in the CSG industry, in effect, is a gas refinery. But it's spread across the entire Darling Downs, and it's a vast pressurised leaking below ground tank farm. It also comes with a labyrinth of gas gathering pipelines water gathering pipelines, purifying networks above the ground. The industry has invested billions of dollars into the development of the unconventional gas industry, but there's not been any adequate research in the other end of it. The state government is given approvals, but there's not adequate regulation to manage that. And despite the rapid expansion of the developments of the industry, the health impacts haven't been researched. The regulation isn't there to protect the public health, and there's a lack of information on chemicals used, the waste produced, where the waste go, how that is handled. There's insufficient data on health impacts and the impacts on the environment. And the only legislation that is directly designed to enforce the activities of the industry is the Environmental Protection Act. And that in itself is premised upon the precautionary principle. Now, the precautionary principle is when human activities might lead to morally unacceptable harm that is scientifically plausible but uncertain, actions must be taken to diminish or avoid that harm. Morally unacceptable harm refers to harms to the environment, harm that threatens life or health, harm that is serious, effectively irreversible, harm that is inequitable and inequitable for the present or future generations, and is imposed without adequate consideration to the human rights. And this is precisely what we are basing our testimony around in this particular tribunal. Generally speaking, there is a list of impacts that this industry does now and will continue to have. Those impacts are listed here in a general format, and they are the basic things that we'll be investigating further in each of those subcases. So those impacts include fragmented forest, marred landscapes, roads, well sites, waste pits and pipelines. They compete with farmers for local water supply. They consume millions of gallons of water themselves. They produce massive volumes of toxic and maybe even radioactive waste. The disposal of that waste causes its own problems. There's a potential for accidents, leaks and spills that put at risk public safety and the safety of the environment. Hazardous pollutants are produced into the air at the expense of the local communities and families and farms. Aquifers are put at risk for this generation and generations to come. The destabilisation of the climate and the environment is also a massive contributor and a massive impact of this industry. And of course, generally speaking, there is a massive disruption to the local community. Mental health, broad physical consequences. There's increased demands on the community's requirements and social services. And generally speaking, there's a great loss for each of the local economies as an impact of this industry. So I look forward to hearing from you. Please contact us and we will discuss the obtaining your testimony and your witness statements to contribute to this Permanent People's Tribunal and our investigation into the human rights impacts of this industry. Thank you and goodbye.